So I just
That's fine with me.
leave that right there. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I appreciate your accepting the invitation to come and talk to us. Let me just start out by saying, I think that when the initial proposal came out, there were a lot of comments made by CMS folk that weren't so kind. What I think was missed in that was the opportunity to have Mecklenburg County partner with you guys in supporting education. And so the way we view this is you develop a plan that includes metrics, tell us where you're going, how you plan to get there, the strategies that you will employ to get there, and then you give us a basis for which we can support financially. That's what we expected. That's not necessarily what happened. And so I will tell you that my board's perspective is they are not interested in continuing to fund a program that doesn't specify outcomes. We are looking for a way to adequately fund education, but there are some expectations that we have in terms of what the outcomes ought to be. And so our purpose today is to find out, and I'm sure we all have questions, but what are the barriers to you guys presenting the plan that we asked for? Or is it just that you don't feel this our right to ask?
So I'll start with just a first gentle pushback when you say we responded with unkind comments, because I just want to be very clear that we have been very deliberate to be kind of above the fray with this. We are trying not to get into a tit for tat. We're just keeping our comments fact-based, and frankly, we're just trying not to engage in this because we've got to keep our focus on the kids and we cannot afford the distraction right now. As far as the proposal, our job, we've done our job, which is to present to you the budget request that reflects what we believe our students need. Your job is to decide how best to allocate the dollars that you're responsible for. And then the next stage of our job is to determine whether or not that allocation is sufficient. But it has never been your role to be an oversight board.
So would you agree that we have oversight of the funding allocations that we make?
Within purpose codes and function codes.
Right. So you agree that's our responsibility?
Yes.
Okay. So, and again, so if we have to design our budget such that it fits within the purpose codes of where we want to allocate our resources, then that's what we'll have to do. But what we have typically tried to do is to give you guys as much freedom and flexibility as possible. And so if you're saying then that that's not a desired, well, if that's not desired, then at least it's good for us to know that. Because Dena, I'm sure you have the ability to allocate resources according to code.
Yeah, and I think the statute actually does allow us to ask for a financial accounting of how resources are spent. And I think it goes deeper than just function and purpose code. I think we can ask for it at any level of detail that we want. So I think
And do you not do that already?
Not potentially to the level of detail we could potentially ask for. You just send us a report, I think every month or so, but it's in big function and purpose codes. It's not any deeper than that. So I think there's opportunity for us to ask for additional data.
And the purpose of that is?
To know how our dollars are being spent. How the
Okay,
county's
so
dollars are
is
being
the
spent.
issue that you don't understand how our dollars are being spent, or is the issue that you want to tell us how to do our strategic plan?
No, I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's both. Well, it's not the second thing that you just said, because we don't want to tell you how to do your strategic plan. But what the board has asked for is
You
a
want to
plan for us
approve
to
of
understand. No, it's not about approving it. It's understanding how the dollars that the county gives you are going to be used to improve outcomes for kids. So that's really, it's not approving it, but it's wanting to see what, how you're going to do it and what you're going to do to be able to improve outcomes for kids. That's what it's always been about. It's not approving your plan or telling you how to spend your money, because clearly we don't have the authority to do that, and we understand that we don't have the authority to do that. But I think to Chairman Dunlap's point, if we understand how you're using our dollars to improve outcomes for kids, it gives the board a better understanding of where to put additional dollars if we think those things are going to improve outcomes. But right now we don't know that, because all we do is continue to provide dollars, and what we're seeing, quite frankly, is the outcomes are not getting any better. So that's, I think, really what the board is interested in seeing. It's not about approving, it's more about partnering, actually. And I think the board's been asking for this for 2 years. This is not the first time that they've asked for this. So
1 year. Well, yeah. So last year at the very beginning of the pandemic, and then this year at the tail end of the pandemic. I have to just say it hasn't felt like a desire to partner. The rhetoric that I've heard, it just doesn't. And that's okay. We'll move on. We will get through this. And I know we wholeheartedly want to get to a place where we can repair these bridges and partner together as two co-equal boards, as the statute sets us up to be. But meanwhile, we do have to get through this impasse. And we simply, we have shared our strategic plan with you all, with the community. We developed it in a very public manner. Our budget request very intentionally showed how the strategic plan lines up with the various elements of the budget request. And beyond that, it feels as though it feels as though, and in fact, I've heard, it may just be gossip, that it is a matter of someone needs to sign off on it that is not on this board, or does not work for this board.
that's not the case.
So nobody that I'm aware of have ever made that comment. We never said that we needed to approve of it. We simply said, we don't want a plan that we can follow. You have not heard anything else any different than that. We didn't tell you what metrics to put in it. We didn't tell you to what level you need to achieve over what period of time. We said, for us to be able to fund it, then we need a plan that we can buy into that helps us to determine whether or not we're funding education adequately or not. Right now, and I will tell you, and be frank with you, I think some of the media spin is disingenuous. So one of the things that was said was that we underfunded CMS to the tune of 90-something million. And so what that meant was that we underfunded the 56 plus the amount that you asked for that you didn't get, which suggests that you're under the impression that whatever you asked for, you should get. That was released by CMS. Am I correct in that?
96 million. I don't recall that
I think it was
number.
80.
Or whatever that figure
They
was.
said 81.
Yeah, 80. Yeah, it was 81 million. And I think Chairman Dunlap, what we did, and we went through a very methodical process with our budget. that included community input, and everything that we requested as part of that budget ask was everything that we thought we needed to appropriately and effectively educate our students. So we didn't, another way of saying that is that there wasn't any fluff in that budget, and we requested what we needed to educate kids.
But you do that every year, and we never fully fund your requests. This is no different than any other year.
That is accurate. That's accurate.
So I don't think, so I always take a little bit of an exception is when we don't fund your full request, it gets framed to the community that we cut you. Because that's just not the case.
Well, okay, then that's a side argument, that's a side conversation. But I will tell you that we are very conscientious of not asking for more than we need. We have a lot of costs that we do not control, which I know you understand, and I know it's confusing for some in the public, but we cannot control what we pass through to charters. We cannot control benefits and retirement costs increasing for 18,000 employees. And that's frustrating for everybody, and that's frustrating for you guys as the funders, because that dollar amount goes up every year. If we were the funders and we had taxing authority, it would be frustrating for us. But it's not a matter of wasting money. It's not a matter of asking for frills. So I guess, but fundamentally, I think we just have a fundamental disagreement as to whether you have the right to structure this budget. This is a very unique way that you've structured this budget with these conditions attached. The only time you've ever done it before that I'm aware of was last year. And frankly, I think we should have pushed back then. I will own that mistake, but we were right at the beginning phases of the pandemic, and I think my board just did not have the appetite or even the bandwidth to think it through. We just thought this is a punch in the gut at the worst time possible, but we made do. We cut positions that we had to cut in order to, get that $15 an hour through in 1 year, and we made do. And it feels as though that encouraged you guys to go even further with this. We do not fundamentally believe that you have the right to attach conditions to the budget. And I understand you disagree, and that's okay. Statute lays out a very clear process for dispute resolutions in this sort of a situation, and that's okay.
And so, well, I guess it's all in how you frame it. And so you can frame what we don't fund you as a cut. And you can frame our expectations as infringing on your right as school board members. But yet you acknowledge it's our right to determine how much you get funded. And then you make the comment.
Well, it's your right to vote on that allocation. And then if we disagree with that amount, we go through the dispute resolution process.
That's true. And so, and how long is that process?
I'm sure we've been through the same training. We have the same information with Kara, I'm blanking on her last name, but the woman that you suggested that came in that presented to both of our boards.
Right.
So.
And so our attorneys and staff believe that we have complied with everything they presented to us on that evening about how we fund the school district. And so, what's at stake here? And, I can't say who you listen to and who advises you, but I will tell you that this has some very strong implications throughout the community, far more reaching than I think some people can imagine. It has funding implications for future bonds. It has political implications for upcoming elections. And so, and I'll also tell you this, that not only do you have one mole within your system, you have several who have offered to provide whatever information we need, and these are people who work within the district and apparently have access to information or access to people who have information. And so the bottom line is what we've asked for, we believe to be reasonable and within the law. And if for some reason it was determined that it is against the law, then we certainly want to comply with the law. We're not going to argue with what the law says. But by the same token, we're going to exercise whatever rights we have to make our decision about funding. I don't know that that's going to change. And we also believe that it's a fair request. If you want to partner with somebody and you're asking for funding to do so, then we're saying what we need in order to be a funder to the level that you think we ought to fund. I mean, we could go through the budget and we could talk about pass-through dollars, not just with charter schools, but with consultants. We could go through the budget and we can see every time an employee leaves CMS, comes back within a matter of months and receive $20,000 and $30,000 increases. We can go through the budget and find out where positions were created that were not state positions that you're expecting the county to fund. And there might be some question as to whether or not they're positions that the county would want to fund. I'm just saying that what we're asking for, we believe to be fair, not just from our perspective, but from the community's perspective, because there are certainly people throughout this community who believe that asking for a plan is a reasonable request when we give CMS over $700 million a year. And if you don't believe the community has a right to know that, if you don't believe that it is a fair question, then
We have always said that we believe the community has a right to know, and that's why the community has been involved in our plan. That's who we are accountable to. And I hope that once we get through this impasse, the spirit of truly caring about the students of Mecklenburg County is going to prevail, because what I heard from you were, maybe it just landed on me this way and that wasn't what you intended, but it sounded like you were threatening us over bonds and over elections.
Share information.
Well, that's how it landed. So what I hope is that
let me
you just look at the 9 members of your board and the greater community, and for sure the 9 members of our board, what we want is the best possible outcomes for the students that we serve.
Well, first of all, let me just say, I'm glad you're recording this because in no way did I threaten you or the board. And I'm glad we have all these witnesses. And so it's an interesting way that when you hear stuff and you regurgitate it, you seem to have this unique ability to frame it differently.
It's just how I heard it. So how did you intend it then?
Exactly what I said. The decisions.
Well, I think what he meant, if I could explain on your behalf, was that if the community doesn't have confidence in CMS and doesn't feel that CMS is being transparent or accountable, particularly in the African American community, they're likely not going to come out and support future bond packages. It has nothing to do with us not supporting them and putting it on the ballot, but you need the community to pull the lever and say yes. And if they don't have that confidence, they're not going to vote for them. And that has huge implications for the school system going forward.
That makes sense. Now, I'm not sure that the community is speaking to us the same way that like the messages that we hear from the community do not always line up with the messages that we hear from you and some of your allies. But, you know, clearly, I don't know.
Well, what I'd like to be able to say is that you don't think, well, let me just put it like this. What I heard you say is that you think our request is unreasonable. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we think it is not the role of a Board of County Commissioners in North Carolina to attach conditions or contingencies to funding. Unless the Board of Education accepts that.
And so you don't accept that?
No.
Okay.
Even though you have in the past.
Even though we did last year.
Well, no, it's been done before last year. We
Oh.
put stuff in restricted contingency before.
See,
Oh, when
I've
was
seen
that?
20. I've seen
Well, there
26
was money in-
budgets for CMS, more so than any one of you all put together. I know where money is in the budget.
If I could say one thing, and perhaps it has been done, we know for sure it was done last year. I think the point is, we don't believe that is fair and that is our role. If our board wanted to accept that, as it did last year, that's the role of the board. But the board doesn't have to accept that, and so that doesn't make it, if it was done previously, it doesn't make it necessarily the right way to go.
And we're not saying you have to. We're simply saying that if you want us to partner with you, that's what we'd like to see. So, I guess, and I want to be clear that that's your response, is that you won't develop a plan that has metrics in it with data that you currently have simply because you don't think it's our right to ask.
Well, we believe we have a plan, and we believe we got a solid plan.
Do you believe that there are metrics attached to your plan?
We do have metrics attached to our plan.
Are they published?
They're not on your website.
Well,
And your strategic plan doesn't really have any underlying metrics to it, and it certainly doesn't talk or speak to the tactics and strategies you're going to take to achieve the goals that are in your strategic plan. So your strategic plan is really more of a framework, and I would say that when Frank was at our meeting, it was obvious that there is data behind your plan,
absolutely.
and he didn't talk much about strategies and tactics. That is another piece of that. So I guess what I struggle with a little bit is, if you have it, why can't we just have it in one place where we can all see it? So you coming and talking about it is one thing, but us to have a single document that has all of that in one place, I don't know that that's really asking too much, because I know you already have it. We're not asking you to
Right. I think
recreate
it
the
comes
wheel.
back to the framing. I think it comes back to the framing. It's that it is as though it is at gunpoint, or at the tip of a sword, and there's this threat around it.
Well, I mean,
and we don't
to be
respond
fair,
well to
I
that.
told Ernest a few times before the budget was released that my board was asking for this.
You did.
And I talked about it, so it wasn't like, I didn't try to communicate it to let you know where the board was. It was a board priority around reducing, student achievement gaps. So that's why I was a little surprised at the response, because you kind of knew it was coming. And so I really thought it was reflective of what you and I had talked about. So I still really feel very strongly, and I've said this publicly, I think you have the data. I think you track it. You've got a lot of data. Frank is very talented at tracking data. I mean, Monica and Frank our data person met with Frank to try to understand what data you have. So I think it's more about just putting it in one piece of document that we can have, that we can say, okay, here's all the data, and that we can continue to talk about it. It was never meant to be at gunpoint, but I think the frustration from the board was that they had asked for it and we never got anything.
And in fact, last year, or maybe the year before that, there was a request to withhold $30 million with no rationale behind it. And the board certainly didn't see the value in doing that. And since that time, we've continued to look for ways to work with the board. We've continued to ask for data. Again, we're not asking you for something that you don't have. We want to make it simple so that the board clearly understands This is your strategy. This is how you plan to get there. We want to look at the data points. Because as it stands right now, I don't think anybody can question whether or not the results of CMS are moving backwards. I don't think anybody can question that. And then when you came to present your budget, I indicated to you in 3 years of your budget plan, your strategy says that you were going to achieve what you had initially proposed achieving 7 years ago, when you've actually moved in the opposite direction. And it clearly states, as if though you were progressing, this is what your plan is for year 3. So to not even be cognizant of the fact that you need to readjust and say, well, maybe we need to start over our plan. Maybe our plan needs to be a 2026 plan. And we're going to establish a new baseline after COVID. None of that.
You have heard that, and that is exactly what we're doing. That is exactly the process that we're going through right now. You know what, I hear what you're saying. I am not sure that we're going to get through this in this meeting. We have a strong plan. It needs a reset because of COVID. We have a huge vacuum in the data because of COVID. We're going through some very intensive governance training right now to help us come out of the pandemic, help this board come out of the pandemic as strongly as possible. But we're doing that on our terms, and I know it's this system that is in North Carolina, that we do not have taxing authority. You do. You have the job of providing the local funding to schools, but that is it. We are elected to handle all the rest of it, and it is not in the best interest of the children that we were elected to serve to abdicate that responsibility. And so we absolutely welcome partnership. We will always treat you with respect and with integrity. And there are many, many ways in which you all can hone in on the out of school time work that you have responsibility over. And perhaps as we are resetting our strategic plan post-pandemic, perhaps you could be tightening up or establishing strategic plans on all of those various, whether it's homelessness, whether it's
strategic plans on that. They're all on our website. You can see every single strategic plan we have. They're voluminous.
Okay, so I guess what I'm...
If I could build on what you said, Madam
Please do
Chair,
that.
is that there seems to be, and this is just the way it lands, so I'm going to use an I statement. From my perspective, there seems to be not an acknowledgement that all of the systems that we operate individually are interconnected and intertwined, and that education doesn't operate in a vacuum. And I think that's what you were trying to, what you said, Madam Chair.
That is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, you said it, but I just feel like there doesn't seem to be that acknowledgement, and with that acknowledgement, let's authentically partner to make sure that we're addressing all of those issues collectively and in partnership. I mean, it is a challenge for a child when we talk about mobility, student mobility. And I know, Chairman Dunlap, you were on the school board, and I know you've probably heard many of the reports about when it's difficult for a child to know where he or she is sleeping overnight, or where their next meal is going to come from, or have all of the other challenges that come with those circumstances, then it is not realistic to expect, that child to come to school and be as prepared to learn as his or her classmate.
And we don't say that as an excuse or as a message of low expectations for any child in any set of circumstances, but it's an acknowledgement of interconnected deeply screwed up systems in our nation and in Mecklenburg County that we have, the only way we're going to resolve them is by digging in together. And this rhetoric that we've been experiencing, really building up over the past year, has been a distraction. It has distracted us. It has pulled us away to a certain extent from our core work. And we can, you know.
So let me just say this, and anybody in this community can look at the county's budget and clearly see that education is the #1 priority. Has been for a long time. And so I don't get it when you don't believe that we don't understand the interconnectivity of education in our community. We understand clearly how it impacts companies and businesses that are located in Mecklenburg County that's looking for an educated workforce. We understand how it impacts our economics. We clearly understand that, which is why education has been our top priority. But the expectation that we will continue to put money in without having outcomes, to continue to put money in without having outcomes that this community can support. Because this is the community's money. And while I'm sure you guys are hearing things that we're not hearing, we're certainly hearing things that you guys aren't hearing. And so, again, what we are offering is an opportunity to partner. And in order to do so, there are things that we believe need to be in place that help us to decide whether or not we're adequately funding education or not. And what I hear you guys saying is that although we have the data and we have a plan, we can't put all of that together in one place so that the community can clearly see it.
It's not a can't. It's that we have a good plan, and this does not feel like a partnership situation. This feels like a hostage situation.
Again, it's the framing of the words. Mm-hmm. And so that well.
Thelma, do you have the time?
No, I don't. Well, I do.
On your phone?
Yeah, 11:34.
Okay.
If I could just comment just a minute ago, you mentioned that you are very, what I heard is that the county expects CMS to produce quality workforce because that's what the business community expects.
No, you didn't hear me say that. I said I clearly understand the impact of education of children because businesses are looking for that when they relocate to this community.
Okay, okay. What CMS would love to be able to provide that if the students that came in were prepared to learn. For all the things that the superintendent mentioned that impact their ability to pay attention to learn. Plus, a lot of kids come with lack of preschool and lack of.
That's why we're making investments in that pre-K.
Yes, and I really, that's one of the very strong things that what county has done that I think is worthy of continually being thanked for that, but we still have children in their homes where the parents won't send them. They didn't apply. So those children still come to school behind. And CMS is struggling with social workers and counselors and mental health people trying to meet their basic needs, that's not really a function of education. That's a function that it would be helpful to CMS if that need was met before they got to our doors.
And so I clearly understand that. All right? And the responsibility for doing that is partly that of the county, partly that of the parents. And so you can look at our budget and see that we fund those opportunities. And not only that, we fund some of that in your budget. And so when I hear that, I'm gonna use your chair's analogy. When I hear that, what I hear are excuses as to why children don't learn. I'm just framing it the way, as I've said things, things are being reframed. So I'm hearing that as that's why children can't learn. And even if that was the case, what I'm saying to you is, if we have the information that we're requesting, we would know better, if necessary, how to fund more services for children so that when they came to CMS, they would be prepared. And for the McKinty-Vento children, how we would help with the homelessness situation, and how we could do any number of things for children in need if we understood what the goals and expectations were, what the strategies were, whatever they are. But the notion that we will continue to just fund CMS simply because you requested, that's changing. That won't continue to happen. And this community is asking for accountability. And so at some point, you have to either decide that you're going to stick to your guns and not produce what we're asking for, or as you said, you'll end up having to use other methods to determine whether or not you are adequately funded. But know this, because I try to think of all the possibilities. The possibility could exist that what you will find out is that you're being more than adequately funded. I mean, you have to accept that as a real possibility. You also have to understand that this community, regardless of the people who are talking to you or not, is not going to continue to just say, give them everything they need when there's nothing to justify why that exists.
So is the community saying that defunding is the answer? I'm not hearing that.
That's
I have
another,
not heard that.
Again, what you've done is you framed that in that tone, and so this is where we have a problem, because it's disingenuous. We have not defunded anything. We have never used the term defund. But as you would speak, you would say that's the way you heard it, right?
Well, you've proposed a $76 million, you've proposed funding $76 million less than what we asked.
But have you always gotten what you asked?
Well, the $56 million is not a defunding.
Right, but you know how budgeting works. We have to assume that that's zero. Otherwise, it's sort of
whimsical. Assume that
whimsical.
because you don't want to come forward and provide the information to the Board of County Commissioners.
We don't, no. You know what, I think we're going to go around and just continue to get increasingly frustrated. So I really appreciate your outreach today. And, like I said, our long-term desire is that we can get back to a place where we can repair bridges and work together. Please know that we earnestly, genuinely want that, but we also are very firm that we will not, and it is not in the best interest of our children, abdicate what is our statutory responsibility, our role. We are responsible to the community. We take that very seriously. We are responsible to the children that we serve and to the 18,000 employees that we serve. And so I'm ever the optimist. I believe we will, this is the dark point, and we will get through to better days in our relationship with one another, but I'm not sure that this conference room is going to resolve anything more right now.
So what do you propose as the next step then, Elyse? If you don't think this will resolve it, what would you propose as the next step?
I think that your board needs to allocate funds as they see fit, and if our board will respond accordingly.
Oh, well, I'm comfortable. Elaine, you have any questions?
Well, I'm not a quick, rapid responder because I'm trying to think through everything, but not right now.
Okay.
I do. This is on my heart, so I've got to say this. I think we all want a community that's thriving, and part of that is having a robust educational system, public education system. So I believe that we want what's best for kids. I think where we, obviously there's some disagreement is on how do we get there? And Chairman Dunlap, when I heard you mention earlier about the McKinney-Vento students, and I know that the county does provide funding for our McKinney-Vento students. But the reality is we've got 3,000 students that are still homeless. So the challenge is that much greater than the resources that are coming to address that issue. And I think at a time when we're coming out of a pandemic, the needs are going to be that much more greater and deeper. And so what I don't understand, and I'm trying to wrap my head around, when the needs are going to be that much greater, how does it seem logical to fund us that much less? The timing is I struggle with that. I struggle with it, and I just had to say that.
Okay, and that's fair if that's the way you frame it. But let me tell you how I'm going to frame it. You're going to get every penny we promised you when we have a plan that we can support. We didn't say we had to approve it. We're asking you to put all, you say you have a plan.
But
put
that
all
we
the,
can support, isn't that the same thing as approving?
No, it is not. We've asked you, and the manager has asked you, and made it clear, you have all the data we're looking for. Put it together in one place. But what I have consistently heard is, we're not going to do it because it's not your right to ask. That's what I heard. Now, if I misunderstood something, please make it clear before we walk out of this door. Okay, so.
Well, the other thing I would say too, and I think, and Ernest and I had this conversation, is that you're right, we are coming out of a pandemic, and there are great needs out there, but we have an incredible opportunity with all this federal money coming between the city, the county, and the school board to do something incredibly transformational. You and I have talked about that. This is an opportunity where we're going to be getting money for housing, money for mental health, money for economic development, money for economic, other kinds of things. And so, while this is definitely, we're coming out of a hard time, we have an opportunity to do something amazing for this community. And I hope that doesn't get lost on this group. And we've had that conversation, and you set up that team between the city and the county and the schools to really look at how we take this almost probably close to $1 billion and do great things for this community. So, that's why I think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, because with your plan and these dollars, we can do some really great work. But we're not going to just throw money at things and not know whether or not we're going to have an impact.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that clear as well.
1,000% agree with that. I think we all do. And And we do have a fundamental disagreement over the conditions part, and we don't want to do anything to encourage this sense that you all can apply conditions unless we accept them. So I think that's really where it comes down to. There's also a lot of, there's a lot of grown-up stuff going on here, but at the bottom line, we all want what's best for kids. We have a fundamental disagreement about whether you can attach contingencies. We'll work that out. We will get that resolved. But not in this conference room, not today. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And know that we are here to partner in the long term.